Cheers.
Cheers.
To season 2.
Whoa, season 2.
Of Didn't Read It.
Oh, I love this. Happy second season. I didn't even realize.
You are going to be the first episode of the second season.
I feel like the queen I am.
You are.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Books. 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 Books.
Hello and welcome to season 2 of Didn't Read It, the podcast that has sworn vengeance on all its enemies. I am still your host, Grace Todd. I am, if you are new here, a reader, writer, editor, all-around book gremlin, and I am so happy to be back for another year of guided tours through the literary canon.
Ooh.
As always, I am joined by one of my beloved friends, without whom the show would not exist. And I cannot say how grateful I am to have every single person who joins me on the show, but especially this person joining me today. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so good. How are you? Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. What an honor to be the first guest of season 2, and a surprise.
It's a little, I figured that there was no better way to kick off than with a little bit of a party. And every time you and I get together, it's a little bit of a party.
I know. It's gloomy outside, and we're going to have some sherry, and then we're going to get a little tipsy afterwards. And who knows how long this night might last.
Or if both of us will make it out alive.
Exactly. I might be in bed by 9.
Well, and fittingly, both for the weather and for a night of many mysteries, we're kicking off season 2 with a little bit of a preview, shall we say, of spooky season. We're starting with some horror, in part because I saw somebody say recently that August is the October of the summer.
Huh, okay.
It's faintly haunted as a month goes.
Okay.
It's a little overripe. There's a sense of things kind of rotting under the surface.
Okay, I see.
Think like Southern Gothic, split fruit.
Desiccated fruit hanging on the vine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we're gonna,
We're leaning into that.
We're leaning in. A hurricane just blew through.
Uh-huh.
This will actually air probably the very end of August or the first weekend of September.
Okay.
But this will be our send-off to August.
I love it. And our embracing of spooky season and pumpkin spice lattes.
All right. Tell me about this fine vintage.
Oh, okay. So sherry is a style of wine produced in the southernmost tip of Spain. And these are fortified wines that are classically paired with aperitivo, tapas. So when you're having your little midday snack of olives and sardines and almonds, you're going to drink a little sherry with it. There's 2 main sherry grapes. Palomino is what we find in the majority of the dry expressions and is going to be fermented under floor yeast. And this is what's kind of most important about these style of wines, is that they age for a long period of time under this floor, this bacteria that is constantly eating the sugars. So these are some of the driest white wines that you can find in the world. Amontillado specifically, however, ages so long that floor yeast starts to kind of lose its power, fade away.
Okay.
And so the wine, which was protected from being oxidized, which is why dry Fino sherries and manzanillas have kind of that clear, beautiful, like yellow straw color. With this in our glass is amber because it started to slightly oxidize.
Okay.
So this is kind of what makes Amontillado so special compared to its like cousin that doesn't oxidize, which is manzanilla sherry.
Okay.
Or Fino sherry.
Now tell me.
Yes.
How does it pair with murder?
Well, I would never know. I have no idea.
You're like, I'm innocent.
Exactly.
He was dead when I got there.
Yes.
And speaking of, Richmond and the Gothic, I have brought you here today to discuss a classic Gothic short story by a young man, a dead man, formerly young man. Let me try that again. By an author that Richmond very enthusiastically claims as their own. The Cask of Amontillado
Ooh.
by Edgar Allan Poe,
Hey, I think I've heard of him.
who is both my cat's namesake and, beloved former resident of Richmond.
Yes, beloved by many.
Yeah.
Not just in Richmond, too. I feel like I see his face smeared all over Baltimore, and
There is a bit of I feel like there's a Cold War between Baltimore and Richmond, between who gets to be like, no, he's ours.
yes, yeah, exactly. And he wasn't even like, he was born somewhere else too, right? Wasn't he born?
He was born in Boston.
Look at that.
He was born in Boston, but he wound up kind of growing up in Richmond because his parents died.
Huh.
He had daddy issues.
Don't we all?
Seriously. So, Michael,
Yeah.
what do you know about the Cask of Amontillado?
I remember reading this when I was in my teens. I was trying to recall earlier if it was as early as 7th or 8th grade or if it was more 10th. I remember the ending pretty vividly,
Yeah.
but as far as like how we get there, I don't really remember much of it, you know?
Yeah, this is one of those stories that it's so much a part of the zeitgeist,
Yeah.
and everybody remembers the end.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people have forgotten all the stuff that happens before that. It's like it's remembered primarily for this one really haunting kind of grotesque image that is the climax of the tale.
Yes. Which is like painted and carved into my brain right now. Like it's
Yeah.
all I can see.
There's no way around it.
Yeah.
But I feel like, we could all stand to kind of revisit
Yeah.
the whole story and like what leads up to that dramatic climax.
For sure. Yeah.
And so that's where I thought we would kick off.
You think most people have probably read this story at some point? Like most American like people who grew up in public school read this? You know, it's pretty canonical.
Yeah, I feel like if you attended an American public school, you were probably assigned it at some point.
Yeah.
And probably at a minimum skimmed it.
Mhm. Right? Yeah. It's not just because we live in Virginia, you know, like
Yeah, no,
Okay.
this is like a very standard part, I think, of like national curricula.
yeah.
Or probably like was.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how much a lot of this stuff has changed.
Good question.
I could see a certain brand of over-involved school board parent being like, it's bad.
There's sherry in it.
But on the flip side, I could also see a certain kind of overly religious parent being like, and that's why alcohol's the devil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just
Just-
totally flip it. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Well, let's get into that.
Yeah, let's dive in. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could. But when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled. But the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser.
Someone's pissed. Damn. What happened?
Well,
Why are you so mad?
so we have opened with a vow of revenge.
Yeah, like immediately.
And we don't find out right off the bat, but our narrator is named Montresor, and he is, we're going to find out, the last of a long and noble lineage. And he is very, very upset with his acquaintance, ?
Yeah.
Fortunato.
Yeah, what is their relationship? Let's find out.
Well, we're not really gonna.
Oh, okay. Cool. Even better.
Montresor, this is all very, very specific for him. It needs to be done sort of just so. And he really harps on the idea that Fortunato could not have seen this coming.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation."
Mm.
Yes.
Mm.
Now, Fortunato,
Mhm.
we find out pretty immediately, has one weak point, at least in terms of one's ability to manipulate him, which is that he prides himself on being a connoisseur of wine.
Mm-hmm.
In proper 1800s fashion, we get some glancing sort of intra-European racism where the narrator says, "Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Australian millionaires." In painting, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere.
Okay.
So the implication is that he is very proud of his knowledge of wines, but he might not be as knowledgeable about wines as he says he is.
Yes, it's a very enthusiastic hobby.
Maybe more than that. Think more about the people who, it's not just a hobby, it's someone who has defined themselves.
Oh, okay.
This is their, like, big point of pride.
So he's a wine influencer,
Yes.
but he actually doesn't really know anything about wine.
That is correct.
Okay.
And it is Carnival.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Carnival?
Well, give me a little rundown in case for those who at home who don't understand, who don't know.
So Carnival, also depending on where you are, is known as Mardi Gras.
Uh-huh.
So it is the big season of excess that immediately predates Lent.
Mm-hmm.
And it is historically a time of not just excess, but kind of an inversion of the social order, right? And that's a big deal.
Okay.
You are consciously allowing some of the social norms to fall by the wayside. And that's
Turning a blind eye
yes.
to drunken debauchery.
Yes. And also, it's very commonly a time when, especially back when you have a significantly more rigid social structure, where those roles are loosened. And so you get a lot of, like, people can mock the rich and the rich will lit them. And it's this time of almost like excising frustrations.
It's cathartic.
Yes. It's catharsis through misbehavior. But it's safe for those in power because it's all happening within this kind of structure. And then Lent happens.
Okay. Yeah, and everyone tightens up.
Exactly. So it is Carnival. Montresor runs into Fortunato, who is out celebrating. He is shit-faced.
Lit.
He is so drunk, and he's dressed as a fool.
Oh my goodness.
He's wearing like an Italian jester. Think like a jester costume. He's got the hat with the bells.
Totally.
And it's a bunch of different colors.
Yeah. There might be some Argyle.
Yeah, exactly. And he runs up to him. He's so excited, Montresor. And he says, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." And Fortunato says, "How? Amontillado? Impossible! And in the middle of Carnival?" Montresor explains to Fortunato that he found such a good deal on this Amontillado, and now he thinks he's been had. He's been taken advantage of. But he couldn't find Fortunato in time to ask him before he paid for it because he was worried about losing a good deal.
Oh, I see.
And he's like, I wish I had you. I have this Amontillado. I think it might be bunk. And Fortunato just can't resist.
Yeah, he's like, I need to know.
There's a lot of, like, very subtle humor in this story. This whole exchange, it would be kind of annoying if I read it to you properly, but it goes on for a minute where Montresor is explaining in bits and pieces this whole thing where, I got this wine, I think I've been swindled, and Fortunato just keeps going, "Amontillado? Amontillado? Amontillado?"
Yeah. So I guess I wish I know a little bit about kind of the history of Amontillado and, like, it in terms of being in Italy. They're in Italy, presumably, right?
They are in Italy.
Well,
some people say it's set in France, but I'm not sure I'm buying it.
Because of the catacomb thing, which we're getting to, I guess.
Well,
there's got to be catacombs in Italy.
There's very little detail here.
Yeah.
And some people have said that it's set in France just before the revolution. I don't know. I think it's...
Because they haven't identified really any of that.
No.
We're just kind of jumping right in. That's something that's kind of noticeable here. Like,
yeah.
Obviously, you're giving me a little summary, but it's like, we haven't said where we are.
No.
We have really no idea about the relationship of these two men.
No.
Just that, hey, I've got this thing that I bought. I know that you know what this quality level should be. come check it out, dude.
Yeah, that's it. The most detail we have is that Montresor refers to his own house as his palazzo.
Mm-hmm.
But Montresor is a French name.
Yeah.
Fortunato is essentially Italian.
Yeah.
Amontillado is Spanish.
Yeah. That's where I'm like, I wish I knew a little bit more about Sherry across more than just Spain in whatever time place this story takes place, which we haven't identified yet.
I think the notion that it is sort of vaguely Italian is probably most likely.
Yeah.
What with it being Carnival, which is very, very popular in like Venice.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Kind of the link to the church.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
And then the kicker, the thing that Montresor says to make sure Fortunato is going to insist upon inspecting this Amontillado is he brings up Lucrezi, who is clearly some kind of mutual acquaintance of theirs. And he's like, oh, Fortunato, I can see that you're on your way somewhere. So I'm just going to ask Lucrezi to come check it out. Fortunato is like, Lucrezi? He can't tell Amontillado from Sherry.
Ooh.
He bridles at this. Here's the interesting thing, though. As you said when you and I were talking about this thing that we are sipping on right now, Amontillado is Sherry.
Yes. So he's probably talking, I think what he's trying to point out here is that Amontillado is going to have this oxidative quality. When you look at it, it's going to be clearly brown. Whereas when you look at Fino Sherry, it's going to have this distinct pale straw color. There's a very big difference. So I think what he's saying here is like, he doesn't even know what he's drinking. You know, he doesn't know anything. So I think he's using the term sherry to talk about different types of sherry that are not Amontillado.
That makes a lot of sense. I have read, because this story is so old and so short, I have read entire academic papers that just hinge on whether Fortunato is making a mistake when he says that, or if Poe's making a mistake. But I think your version makes the most sense.
No, I don't think that's it at all. Yeah, exactly. I think that they're just talking about two different styles. And this would never have been called sherry. It would have been called Amontillado.
Yeah.
You know?
So he says, Lucrezi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And Montresor says, and yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. And he's like, fuck that.
In those exact words.
So he grabs Montresor and basically drags him back to his own house. As they leave, Montresor pulls his cape around. He's wearing a big, like, dark cloak and a black silk mask. So he is also dressed for Carnival, except according to some fairly niche papers I have read. I'm going to have to do a lot of that, by the way, because this story has been so thoroughly picked apart like a carcass that you almost can't say anything about it without being like, well, not everyone agrees with me, but
so there's somebody out there who's written a paper and disagrees.
Yes, very much so. There's the whole paper I read about being like, it's definitely set in France, was all hinged on the one line about Montresor's clothes that was basically like, no, he's just dressed normal because this was a thing. And I'm like, it's Carnival. If it says he's wearing a black mask, I think he's just dressed for Carnival.
Yeah. Exactly.
But who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm happy somebody took the time to.
So just he looks spooky. We'll just go with that, right?
Cool.
So it's off to the palazzo, and Montresor makes a note that he is certain that all of his servants are gone, because he explicitly told them he would be gone for 2 days and that they shouldn't leave the house under any circumstances. And so he is sure that they have all left.
Okay. What a weirdo.
Right?
I'm like, all I have to say right now is that I'm not reading the story and I'm getting a summary, but this just dives right in.
Yes.
And like, it's like, it doesn't, they give you no, is the word exposition? Like there's no setting the tone. No. It's just, here we go.
Yeah. It's so short as to be like parable-like.
I'm amazed right now. I don't remember this when I was a child, you know?
So they go to the palazzo. And again, Fortunato is like, we gotta go. Like, let's do it. Mm-hmm. And they go down into the catacombs. And it's like 4 sentences. We are on the street. We are in the catacombs. Let's fucking go. Mm-hmm. They get down into the cellars and Fortunato starts to cough. And he's like, it's fine. It's nothing. Montresor says, come, said I with decision. We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as I once was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, There is Lucrezi. Enough, he said. The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. True, I replied.
Yeah, foreshadowing. True, I winked.
True, I said, famous last wordsingly. Actually, it should be, I won't die of a cough, I said, famous last wordsingly. True, said my mysterious friend, wearing a black silk mask as he dragged me into a catacomb.
Spoiler alert.
And the catacomb, you get this kind of in fits and starts as the story kind of reaches a climax. But the catacombs are described as being, it's this vast underground cellar, and it is just piles and piles of skeletons intermingled with all of his wine storage. And so it's just like skull, wine bottle, pile of skeletons, cask of wine. And so as they move deeper and deeper through the catacombs, they stop multiple times and just grab a bottle and open it.
Yeah.
Montresor keeps plying Fortunato with more alcohol. He keeps being like, oh, your cough, let's drink to your health, that kind of thing. As they go deeper. So they stop and they drink some wine. Fortunato admires how extensive the vaults are. This is when Montresor begins talking about how great and numerous his family was. And it's kind of implied that he must be the last of the line or one of the last, right? There's no one else in the house besides servants, according to his little side note earlier.
There's no Lady Montresor.
There's no Lady Montresor.
Because he's gay.
And Fortunato said, maybe.
I'm like, honestly, all of this has cruisy undertones.
Let's put a pin in that. Do not let me forget it.
Okay.
We'll loop back around.
Yeah, let's do it.
And Fortunato says that he forgets the coat of arms of the Montresor family, which is an insult.
Okay.
Right?
What did he say again? Sorry?
He says that he forgets the coat of arms.
Oh.
One of the implications that we're getting here is that Fortunato is a little bit nouveau riche, maybe? That Montresor is from an old, very important family, or formerly important family. Fortunato is...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, think about his name, right? He's...
Fortunate.
Exactly. Lucky. He might as well be called Lucky.
Yep.
And so Montresor pauses to remind him that the coat of arms is a huge human foot d'or in a field of azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. And the motto is, and everyone always forgive me my Latin, Nemo me impune licessit.
Okay.
Which means no one offends me with impunity.
Oof.
All right?
Yeah. You said it's a golden foot stomping a snake that's biting into its heel.
Yes.
Oof.
No step on snack.
Yeah. That's a cool family coat of arms.
Yeah. Obviously, we've got a familial inheritance here, right, of being deeply intolerant of insult. They go deeper. They go deeper and deeper into the catacombs. And it's funny because every once in a while he reminds you that his hat is jingling.
Oh, yeah, because he's still dressed up like a jester.
So right. it's like very dark. They each have one torch.
Yeah.
And then you just have to imagine every few steps it's just like ding, 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 ding.
Maybe this is something you mentioning the torches, that reminds me. Aren't the torches getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer as there's like less and less oxygen?
Yes. By the end, the torches are barely glowing. The last time that they pause to drink, Fortunato he coughs again, and Montresor is like, kind of the last time, he's like, we should go back before it's too late. The air is not good for you. And Fortunato is like, it's nothing, but let's have another drink. Says, I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. It's a pun, get it? Sorry.
No, I don't. Oh, yes, now I get it. Yeah, got it.
It's a French wine called...
Grave.
Of the grave.
Yeah.
He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesture I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. You do not comprehend, he said. Not I. Then you are not of the Brotherhood. How? You are not of the Masons. Yes, I said. Yes. You? Impossible! A Mason! A Mason, I replied. "A sign," he said, "a sign." "It is this," I answered, producing from beneath the folds of my cloak a trowel. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." Fortunato has just attempted to give him one of the secret signs of the Freemasons. Montresor has responded somewhat grimly with a masonry trowel,
Okay.
which he has for reasons.
Okay, so wait, I'm very confused. Fortunato, why does he decide to offer this Freemason sign?
He appears to be sort of checking to see if Montresor is a fellow Freemason.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
he wouldn't you know that?
Well, we don't know how well acquainted these people are.
Okay.
We have no...
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
We have
you're right.
nothing. We have no context.
They have just been cruising for sex at Carnival, and we're gonna definitely go there. Okay.
Well, but this comes right after Montresor reminds Fortunato how ancient and sort of noble his lineage is. So it's possible, probable,
Yeah.
that Fortunato is realizing that Montresor maybe has more influence or...
He's just digging a little deeper.
Exactly.
He's more curious. Okay. So he pulls out the trowel.
They get to the end of the crypt. At the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared another recess, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th side, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior crypt or recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucrezi..." "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite.
Ooh. Fettered meaning like binded him, like put him like shackled.
Yes.
Oof.
A chain around his waist, in fact.
Yikes.
It says, he was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key...
Drunk?
I know.
Astounded?
Astounded, drunk,
horny?
Horny. I'm really liking this alternate reading that you're suggesting.
He's in a jester outfit. It's Carnival. They're going into a dark space. I don't know.
I want to read this paper.
None of the servants are home.
Yeah, you're making this is... Hey, babe.
It's like...
My servants aren't home.
Yeah. You want to see my coat of arms?
So, Fortunato has been chained to the wall.
Again. It just keeps getting
kinky.
BDSM. Here we go.
And Montresor starts mocking him. He says, "Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. But first I will render you all the little attentions in my power." And at first, all Fortunato can say is, "The Amontillado!" And the next line is, "True," I replied. "The Amontillado." Montresor moves the pile of bones aside, and underneath is stones and mortar, and he starts bricking up the recess that he has just changed Fortunato in. It says, "I had scarcely laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low, moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth. And then I heard the furious vibration of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel. So he's like, this is great.
Yeah,
Like he's
getting off on the sounds of this guy's chains clinking.
yes.
Oof.
He gets the wall up to chest height and then pauses. And then Fortunato begins to scream. And it says, "For a brief moment I hesitated, I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed, I aided, I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still."
He screamed back?
He screamed back.
Louder.
Yes.
Ugh.
Right?
That's some, like, Buffalo Bill shit.
Uh-huh. So he gets the wall up until there's one stone left.
Mm-hmm.
He gets it part of the way in. And then after many, it's been hours now, Fortunato speaks. Now there came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "Ha, ha, a very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo. Ha, ha, over our wine. Ha, ha. The Amontillado," I said. "Ha, ha. Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will not they be awaiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said, "let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor." "Yes," I said, "for the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came in forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick. It was the dampness of the catacombs that made it so. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace resquiat. The end.
What is that? In peace we rest?
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Ooh.
So that's the end of the story.
Ooh.
That's
Wow.
the whole thing.
Yeah, that's like way different than I remember it. Well, I mean, not like the meat of the story, I suppose, but all of the context.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much happening there.
So much happens, and that last little bit is way longer than I remember it in terms of kind of the description of walling him up, you know?
Most of the story is in the catacomb.
Yeah.
And the walling up bit lasts forever.
Forever, yeah. To really, really make an impression. I guess this would have been very, very, very scary to read. Nothing really like this has been created up to this point, right?
No.
I mean, no one has leaned into this kind of horror, right?
Yeah, so this is...
That's not just like strictly allegorical, you know? Like, I feel like this is kind of leaning into horror that's like based in reality.
So
this could happen to you.
This is peak gothic horror. This is definitely like kind of the peak of Poe's career. It's also, especially in terms of talking about how much time we spend walling Fortunato up with these really, really, really famous stories. Sometimes I think we forget that people who read them for the first time were reading them for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
It would be very common, even in gothic fiction, even in gothic horror. The reader at the time very well could have spent the last 2 or 3 pages waiting for someone to intervene, right? Like waiting for waiting for the kind of expected conclusion where Fortunato fights back or escapes or
changes his mind,
or
Montresor changes his mind,
or Montresor is punished, or Montresor, I mean, think about
gets killed halfway through, or
well, I mean, and also like think about even other famous Poe stories. The narrator of The Telltale Heart is confessing in police custody.
Mm-hmm.
Montresor, the last thing he tells you in this story is that it's been 50 years.
Yeah. He's kept it a secret.
He's never been punished.
Uh-huh.
And that was his whole thing at the beginning, right? Vengeance is only vengeance if you get away with it. Now, there is an implied listener in this story.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have speculated that this might be Montresor's final confession on his deathbed.
Yeah, he's about to die.
But even so, he got away with it.
Yeah, it's like Salieri and Amadeus.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. The confession of revenge long after.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
The Salieri of Amontillado.
Was that like a Amadeus? Was it a play first?
Oh yeah. The movie was based on a play from 1979, which was inspired by a play from 1830. Which actually predates the original play. Predates.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So, I have some fun historical context and gossip and bullshit for you, but like
I'm so excited.
Before we go that way, like reactions, thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've already sort of touched on this a little bit earlier. Like, I am so curious to know how the F these dudes know each other. There is zero knowledge given. Even their names seem so allegorical, and the fact that they give us no kind of biographical information about these dudes, or like why, like what's the point? Why are you doing this, dude? Other than it's to be vengeful. And I'm also really spooked. That was, maybe it's just the way that you read it, but it was
Are you worried that I'm gonna wall you up in black iris somewhere and leave you here?
Listen, there's not enough Amontillado. The Amontillado!
So this is one of the really small things that I just want to point out, because when I see people refer to the story like glancingly, one of the phrases that I always see people use is they'll be like, I have a very fine vintage of Amontillado. But that's not it, right? It's darker than that. The whole point is that the Amontillado might be trash.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not even...
Fortunato isn't being lured in by the promise of something good. He's being lured in by his own ego.
Yes. Okay.
And I think that's one of the things that gets lost.
Sure.
Is it's not beware someone offering you an exciting treat. It's beware charging into a situation you don't understand because someone has...
will take advantage of you.
Played up your ego to the point where you aren't thinking clearly.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is like a kind of forgotten, very important takeaway of this story.
Yeah.
Like, Fortunato kind of fucked himself.
Sure. Like, yeah, if you were to ask the question, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy here, it's not necessarily clear.
There is no good guy.
Yeah, they are both bad guys.
There's a victim.
Yes.
But not a good guy.
Yeah.
One of the things is Montresor keeps telling him to leave. He keeps being like, never mind. Let's go back. Let's go back.
Yeah. But I feel like those are baiting, though. Like
no, they are.
He's trying to get this guy to commit harder by giving him the opportunity to exit.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also, Fortunato didn't have to be manipulated that easy.
Yeah.
And it's...
Amontillado.
Yeah. He just keeps saying, the Amontillado.
Yeah. Well, okay, so how much of this is not, like, allegory against, like, drunkenness? Like, I don't think Poe would... I mean, he didn't seemingly write... It doesn't seem like that's what the end goal here is.
No.
Don't be loose, because you're going to get walled up.
No, that is not part of it, except insofar as Fortunato is drunk. But I think what's more important is Fortunato's ego.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, to kind of contextualize this, we need to talk about Poe's War of the Literati.
Okay, let's go. Buckle up.
In the 1840s, Edgar Allan Poe is a struggling author, magazine writer. He's writing reviews, book reviews, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And at this juncture in the American literary landscape, American literature, which is still kind of figuring out its identity in a lot of ways. So we talked a little bit in like the Sleepy Hollow episode and in the Nathaniel Hawthorne episode about kind of the birth of American literature as distinct from English literature. And we're still kind of figuring some of that out in this period. And American literature is dominated by New England, specifically like Massachusetts and also New York. And I know New York is not part of New England. I can hear you out there. I don't know who you are, but I can hear you. American literature is dominated by New England, and New York.
Don't at her. No comments, please.
And Poe is somewhat incensed by this fact because he is from the South. He is a Southern writer. And his point is essentially that you've got these very small, cliquish groups of writers in New York and Massachusetts and, around there who are not just dominating the scene, but preventing anyone else from breaking in.
Okay.
And doing it pretty intentionally. And I feel like this is going to sound familiar to all of us. This scene is dominated by one or two people who are genuinely very, very talented, like Longfellow the poet, who are then surrounded by a bunch of less talented acolytes who are being artificially propped up by their proximity to this clique of people, while equally talented people elsewhere in the country are being artificially kept from succeeding because they cannot break into this very cliquish, very tight scene. Tale as old as time.
Exactly.
Right?
I was like, that applies in so many different places.
Like, oh, I'm sorry, you wanted to succeed without already living in New York? So Poe had a problem with this. And Poe also, over the course of his life, and we're not going to get too much into his biography because, look, the information is out there.
Yeah.
There's so much information about
fast.
Poe.
Yeah.
But in terms of this story, one of the things to remember is that he was a young man who kind of spent his entire life adjacent to success and financial stability and never quite achieved it. So his parents died when he was very young. He had a very complicated relationship with his foster father. His foster father ultimately disinherited him.
Oh, wow.
And by the time he's writing this story and by the time the War of the Literati kicks off, he is living hand to mouth. But he's living hand to mouth despite the fact that he's worked at several different literary magazines as an editor. And under his guidance, those magazines became much more successful. But he didn't own them. Yeah. He didn't own a stake in them. Yeah. And so he was making other men wealthier and working for a pittance.
Tale as old as time.
Again, where have we heard this before?
Yeah.
With the War of the Literati, I think part of what happens is that he has a good point, but his frustration, his anger, his despair, quite frankly, winds up pushing him into being more intense than maybe is a good idea, which is also something I think we see a lot. People who are very passionate, people who have been sidelined a lot. I mean, you see it all the time in flame wars. You see people you agree get into a fight on Twitter, and all of a sudden they're saying shit that you're like, girl.
Whoa, yeah, whoa.
Babe.
Yeah. Just...
You need to take it down. Like, you're correct. You have a good point.
Yes.
But you are overdoing it.
You're out there. Yeah. It's dialed to 11. It needs to be at an 8.
And this kind of happens in the War of the Literati. And also, I want to be clear, these people are so bitchy. They're so bitchy.
Okay.
And also, to be clear, they are being just as nasty to him as he is to them.
Okay.
But they have more power than he does, which is why it was probably ultimately a bad idea for him to go as hard as he did.
To engage, yeah.
But the War of the Literati plays out in articles. Like, they're publishing these things in their magazines about each other.
I love it. Okay.
So I'm going to read you some choice quotes. Mr. Poe is about 39. He may be more or less. If neither more nor less, we should say he was decidedly 39, but of this we are not certain. In height, he is about 5'1" or 2 inches, perhaps 2.5 inches. His face is pale and rather thin, eyes gray, watery, and always dull, nose rather prominent, pointed, and sharp, nostrils wide, hair thin and cropped short, mouth not very well chiseled, nor very sweet. His tongue shows itself unpleasantly when he speaks earnestly, and seems too large for his mouth. Teeth indifferent, forehead rather broad, and in the region of ideality decidedly large, but low, and in that part where phrenology places conscientiousness and the group of moral sentiments, it is quite flat. Chin narrow and pointed, which gives his head, upon the whole, a balloonish appearance, which we may account for by his supposed lightheadedness. And it just goes on, and his address is gentlemanly and agreeable at first, but soon wears off and leaves a different impression after becoming acquainted with him. His walk is quick and jerking, sometimes waving.
So who is saying this about him? It's
So
different people?
This is one of the people, this was Fuller. So he gets into a fight with a bunch of different authors.
And are there other people on his team? Is there like a group of like this like Southern contingency, or is he kind of fighting a lone war?
It's kind of him alone.
Yeah.
He doesn't have much help.
Yeah.
He has a couple of sort of allies, but not really, because he's kind of picking a fight that he shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Fuller, who wrote all of those nasty things about him, Poe's response was, "Mr. Fuller is a pitiful man. Much is he to be pitied for his countenance. That of a fat sheep in a reverie. The fact is, it is difficult to be angry with him. Let his self-complacency be observed. How absolute an unconsciousness of that proverbial mental imbecility which serves to keep all the little world in which he moves."
Wow. Yeah, I like Poe's a little bit more cutting.
And then they got really nasty with each other until
shit.
Fuller ultimately said something that was legally actionable and Poe sued him for slander.
Wow.
Again, like, you can read like whole papers on this, but
Yeah.
the moral of the story is he was engaged in this flame war with these people who had more power than him, more influence than him, more money than him.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole reason he was in a flame war with them to begin with was because he had committed the sin of honestly not doing much more than pointing out that they were discounting a whole half of the country, literally, and that they were excluding people who deserved attention in order to flatter people who were not as talented, but they were friends.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so he kind of wins the War of the Literati in a way, in that he winds up suing Fuller, he gets a settlement, but his reputation is kind of damaged forever. And even though he might have satisfied himself on the one hand, what ultimately happens is that those same people pretty handily prevent him from starting his own magazine, which was sort of his overriding goal toward the end of his life.
Yeah.
And one of the last things that happens before he dies is he's desperately trying to get this magazine off the ground, and it seems that they sort of banded together and made sure that he couldn't get the funding together.
Damn.
And then, as we all know, he died very drunk and very sad.
How old was he?
He was 40.
So he died pretty young.
He died pretty young.
He was 5'2"? I didn't realize he was that short.
He was a short little guy. I mean, in fairness, a lot of them were short little guys.
Yeah, exactly.
People were
Five-
malnourished.
5'2" may have been tall.
This story is written on the backdrop of all of that. So you can see why a narrative of vengeance, of true vengeance, would be appealing. And why a man like him, with the background that he had, would write a story where you've got an older, more established family kind of waging war with these upstarts. This Johnny-come-lately nouveau riche, doesn't understand what they're talking about.
Although, wouldn't you, if I had to pen a character that embodied Poe, it would be Montresor, right? Which is the family that has the prestige, or it comes from a family of prestige.
Right. Well, that's who he is. He's Montresor. Fortunato is
the nouveau riche.
Fortunato is the literary idiots
Oh, I see.
who are undermining him, even though he's more talented than they are.
Heard. Got it. Okay.
Because they're the, the Nepo babies. They're the rich.
The friends of.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
So he has no problem with their mentors.
Except insofar as their mentors are
feeding into this.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I know.
Is Twain around at this time? When is Twain writing?
Twain is born in 35.
Okay.
So when the story comes out, Mark Twain is 11.
Also, where was this published? Sorry.
So this is really interesting. It was published in a ladies' magazine.
in spooky season?
No. People were just big into horror stories back then.
Whoa, that's cool.
It was published in Godey's, Godey. I don't care if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Sure.
Don't tell me if I am.
No.
It's
who knows?
Godey's or Godey's
Sure.
ladies' book,
Okay.
which he worked for
Okay.
he was an editor there. It was kind of read by everybody, but it was like explicitly a women's magazine.
Uh-huh. Huh.
That'll distract. That'll keep the ladies occupied for an
Exactly.
afternoon.
They'll talk about that for days.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think the flame war element of it is really interesting, and then also so the Masonic thing.
Yeah.
I think is just kind of an interesting thing to note. During this time period, there was like a big kind of moral panic around the Masons.
Mm-hmm.
The 1840s was a really interesting time for Masons in the States because the early Masonic lodges in the United States were founded by essentially the new American aristocracy, right? Like the tippy-toppy
Founding Fathers. Yeah.
There was a movement over the next kind of century, well, not quite century, but over the next few decades.
Sure.
Of more like middle-class self-made men joining the Masons.
Okay.
And so the Masons themselves were in kind of an upset where the American aristocracy were like, what are we becoming? And the self-made men were like, actually, we represent the ancient Masons because the ancient Masons were Masons.
We're working class.
Exactly. And so the Masonic temple itself was in flux in terms of like, which direction are we going to go? Are we the aristocracy? Are we more working class? What is this? How is this all going to shake out? At the same time, in 1826, there was a guy named William Morgan who was writing a tell-all book about the Masons, who mysteriously drowned in Lake Niagara in New York. And 26 Freemasons were indicted.
Wow.
4 of them were convicted and received slap-on-the-wrist sentences. Most of the jurors and also the judge
were Masons. Oh, wow.
This was a capital S scandal.
Yeah, it sounds it.
And it kicked off, well, it's funny, I was going to say a moral panic, but I don't think that's, moral panic implies that it's unfounded. It kicked off a lot of rage at the idea that America was being manipulated by this secret society who apparently could just murder people with impunity. Fun fact, by the way, a lot of cops are Masons. Anyway, no reason. Moving on.
Exactly. Woohoo.
This caused enough of a stink that membership of the Masons bottomed out in the 1840s-ish, like as low as it ever got. And it's bounced back since then.
Yeah.
But Fortunato being a Mason, that's...
It's not just because we're talking about a story where they're laying a brick wall.
It's not just so that he can make the joke about, like, I'm a Mason and so am I.
Yeah.
This is an important characterizing detail. Fortunato is not just nouveau riche. He's not just happy where Montresor is miserable. He's not just married where Montresor is not. He's not just rich where Montresor is apparently struggling for money. He's beloved, he's well-connected, and he's a Mason.
Yeah.
He's such a potent sort of symbol of all the things that keep people from succeeding by merit, right?
Yeah.
And that's what this is about, is it's kind of the ultimate revenge fantasy. And I think this is very common, and I think it's especially common among young men who are raised just close enough to the middle class that they have concrete expectations for their own futures, but they aren't rich or well-connected enough to really break through.
Yeah.
This is kind of the symbolic story of being fenced out.
Yeah.
Of being fenced out by someone who just has all of these advantages that you will never have. And it doesn't matter what kind of a family.
Yeah.
In the span of the story, there is not time for Montresor to be talented, but we can say that he's from an old and noble family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to have to be close enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it does very much tie into this kind of like antebellum notion of lineage. And, you know, there's definitely an extent to which a lot of antebellum Americans, and especially a man like Poe, who's from the South, it's all about those old Southern families. Like, there's definitely some stuff going on there that is, you know, very aristocracy influenced and like, but the point stands.
It's funny that you mentioned, because he did mention Lady Fortunata at one point, right?
Yeah.
But
she's a widow now.
But no Lady Montresor.
No, the house is empty. The only people he mentions are the servants.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I like this. Everything you just kind of painted to kind of tie that thought up made a lot of sense. They're foils of each other. Yeah.
This story gets written about a lot as just like a clean-cut, uncomplicated revenge fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of the way that people talk about Kill Bill.
Okay.
It's just the takeaway. Even like literarily, even in some of these like papers that I'm reading, it's like he got away with it. He succeeded. This is Poe's revenge fantasy, the end. But there's that implied audience.
Mm-hmm.
The story is addressed to someone.
To somebody.
And by virtue of having that implied listener, who is us, right? Mm-hmm. The story is addressed to this implied listener who we are standing in for. Mm-hmm. Which puts us in the story. Mm-hmm. And the only reaction that you can have to this story, even if you believe Montresor, you know, at his face, and you buy in with him that Fortunato has wounded him unforgivably, there is no way that you are going to hear the story of a man walling another man into a crypt to die and not be horrified by it.
Yeah.
But because of the implied listener, we are in the story being horrified. Mm-hmm. So Montresor got away with it, but we perceive him as monstrous. So he did lose something. This is not a clean-cut victory. And Poe was A, of all self-reflective, and B, of all self-loathing enough to know that. Mm-hmm. And so one of the big dimensions of this story is, yeah, he got away with it, and he wasn't driven mad by guilt, and he still feels fantastic about himself. Mm-hmm. And it's important to remember, and I think more important to remember now as we look back at this story, that he opens with the absolute certainty that it is his right, his absolute right, to punish Fortunato.
Step on the snake.
That's a really interesting choice of word, right? To punish him. Not to avenge himself, not to cut him down to size, but to punish him. Mm-hmm. Punishment implies
wrongdoing.
Punishment implies wrongdoing. Punishment also implies authority. Right? Mm-hmm. If your friend gets mad at you, you don't say your friend has punished you.
Yeah.
You're punished by parental figures, by teachers, by authority. Mm-hmm. You were punished by the law. Mm-hmm. That really clear-cut certainty that he has the absolute right to punish Fortunato is really interesting, because right now we are embroiled in a cultural moment where there are huge swaths of people who are convinced that it is their absolute prerogative to punish people that they perceive of as having wronged them in ways that they will never understand. And that's what happens to Fortunato, right? Fortunato has no idea that Montresor even has a problem with him.
Yeah.
Until it is too late.
Yep.
And so I don't think that this is that uncomplicated a revenge fantasy after all. Mm-hmm. Because Montresor has made himself monstrous. And I think Poe knows, and even if Poe doesn't know, I think it's a fair reading of the story, that he has made himself monstrous through his absolute certainty that he had the right.
That he is the authority.
To punish Fortunato this way. And I think Poe is sympathetic to the impulse. I think we're all sympathetic to the impulse. But even if you don't suffer for it, even if there is no one to stop you, even if you live in a societal moment where no one will stop you because they think you're right, you are made monstrous by taking it upon yourself.
Giving yourself the authority.
To punish other people, especially unto torture and death.
Whoa. Brought that around. I was not expecting that.
Hey! It's a funny podcast!
We'll have a little bit more sherry. Wow, that's a... I think you're right, though, that it's very easy to, as a 10th grade reader, just look at this as a, revenge fantasy. But there's other layers. There's other things happening here.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on here. He says rest in peace at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it ends, right?
Yeah. And I mean, maybe he's saying that ironically. Maybe he's saying that essentially to himself, if this is his last confession before death. And, I think textually and importantly, I don't think he thinks he regrets it. And he probably doesn't regret it. But it doesn't make him not monstrous. It doesn't make him good. It just makes him avenged and self-satisfied.
Yeah. Oof.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But also maybe they were dating.
Well, the Lady Fortunato kind of threw that off for me, I guess. But not that means anything.
I was going to say that does not mean that they weren't boinking.
Sure.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, it really just like the story materializes out of thin air, and that's really what kind of captures me the most. I really want to know like what's happening right before. Like, is he just like literally in the street in a jester outfit? And then
it's Carnival.
It's so weird.
Imagine just like being at the bar having a nice time.
Yeah.
And then you get goaded into going to your pal's house to show off because he's getting you to be condescending about something.
Yeah.
And he is being a real dick. Like the whole time he's like, Lucrezi. Lucrezi doesn't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah, he hates Lucrezi. Poor Lucrezi.
But then next thing you know, you're walled up in your friend's wine cellar. Oops. Well, acquaintances.
He screams at him.
The most common parallel I can think of contemporarily is it really feels like being the victim of an elaborate revenge plot by like a coworker, like a recently demoted coworker that you were only passingly familiar with, who's like mad that you got promoted. And so they walled you up behind the filing cabinets in the basement.
Yikes. Yeah, no thanks. So you were saying that it's debated where this is. I guess it doesn't matter where this is set. None of that matters.
No. It's a character sketch.
I know. I need to
more
just
than anything.
I need to just get over that. But I feel like I want more context. Like, I feel like there's things that are hidden there that we haven't even addressed.
Oh yeah, there's so much.
Like the family crest.
Yeah, there's so much scholarship around this story.
Yeah.
People who have picked apart like every teeny tiny little facet.
Yeah.
It's worth doing. I highly recommend like you out there, if you want to go read some scholarship about this story. There's so many angles to approach it from. There's so many little tidbits to pull out.
Yeah. Well, other than just like kind of setting the mood and it being kind of creepy and ultimately being foreshadowing, who's got catacombs under their house that they're just like keeping their wine in? You know what I mean? And like, I guess like I want a little bit more context as to, was that something that was just like an exciting idea for Americans to read about? You know, like this, there's nothing like that here. You know what I mean? Like,
that's true. Americans tend not to have catacombs.
You know what I mean? Like
under their houses.
It's not. I don't know. You know, I guess what I'm trying to say is why that? Other than just to keep it creepy.
Why catacombs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely...
It could have just been his wine cellar. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like the imagery of there being stacks of bones, him like disrespectfully sitting on them. I think all of that's important for setting the tone, right?
Yeah.
If it were just like this dank cellar, it would not be as spooky.
Or as grand.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that is important for Poe, and sort of from the perspective of the story, is that he is doing this in the resting place of his ancestors. He is not just avenging himself, at least in his mind.
It's for the family.
He's avenging every one of the Montresors, right?
Mhm.
No one wrongs me with impunity is the family motto, which means that Fortunato, at least in Montresor's perspective, has not just wronged him,
Yep,
he's wronged all of them.
exactly, the lineage.
And, you know,
Ugh.
from a scene-setting perspective, that really drives the point home.
Yeah.
Also, not to bum you out again, but I can think of a group of people who right now think that they are avenging themselves and every single one of their ancestors when they decide that it's their prerogative to punish people.
Yep.
Season 2!
Ceasefire.
It's funny, that too, but I wasn't even thinking about Gaza. I was thinking more about, like, all of the trans panic and the...
Oh, wow. I was immediately going to Gaza.
Yeah, well, it turns out there's so many options.
Season 2 starting off with a lot of optimism.
So funny, haha! Look, maybe I'm probably overthinking it, and I think you were correct. I think Montresor and Fortunato had a torrid love affair.
They'd fucked in the catacombs already a lot.
Already, like many times. Fortunato was out cruising for Carnival.
Yeah.
And Montresor saw him hooking up with one of Montresor's other ex-boyfriends.
He was like,
and he just snapped.
Yeah.
He just lost it.
He's like, let's fucking go.
He was like, I can't do this anymore.
Well, you know where we go.
And because they had many fights when they were hooking up over the Amontillado,
Yes.
he was like, Amontillado this.
Yeah.
And it was just a lover's tiff gone horribly wrong.
Have they done like a Cask of the Amontillado porn? Is it weird that I'm getting turned on?
Cask of Amontillado, like BDSM, like, no, not the catacombs.
The big fat Cask of the Amontillado.
Just, I'll let you out of the catacombs, but first you have to do something for me. Bow, bow,
It's
bow,
like,
bow, bow, bow.
put these chains on your arms. Get fettered to the wall.
Not the catacomb. Oh my god.
Fortunato.
Well, buddy?
I am thrilled now. I want to go back and find if I'm sure I do not have paperwork from high school where we would have been talking about this, but we certainly weren't talking about those kinds of themes 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now I want to learn all more about the Masons.
Yeah. That was just like a little tip of the iceberg. Like, especially when I'm researching this show, like things will pop up and I will be like on the verge of going down a rabbit hole. And then I'm like, I do not have time.
You're like, I actually can't do that. Yeah.
But yeah, now I'm very curious, A, of all about this murder.
Yeah.
And like the aftermath. But B, of all, I really want to do a little bit more reading on how and when the Masons pop up in the fiction of that era, knowing that they were like kind of a popular villain in a way.
Yeah. And like politically, how did that work?
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if Poe was killed by a Mason.
Honestly.
How many years after he wrote this did he pass away?
Like 4 years?
He was killed
5 years.
He was killed by the Masons.
He was probably killed by the Masons. You heard it here, folks. Here, I'm just gonna, out of curiosity, because this is the age of conspiracy theory.
Oh.
Like that is the era we live in.
Yes.
It was the space age, and then it was
9/11, right?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna Google Edgar Allan Poe killed by Masons and just see what okay.
Oh no.
Okay.
Oh no.
I'm not even clicking on it, but I just want you to know that the very first post, or the very first Google result, is a LinkedIn post from 8 years ago.
Oh my god.
The headline is Alexander Hamilton and the Death of Edgar Allan Poe, and the little bit of preview text just says, the possibility that Poe's death somehow resulted from Hamilton's connection to Freemasonry is very real.
Somebody needs to hire this guy immediately.
That is the
8 years ago.
first.
This guy's been looking for a job for 8 years. Somebody hire him.
That is the first result.
Thank you, Google.
So yeah, who knows? Maybe he was murdered by the Masons. Let's go with that,
Yeah,
honestly.
I'm gonna take that one to my grave.
Poor buddy.
Yeah.
Well, kids,
That was fun.
that was great.
What a little kickoff to spooky season.
Yeah,
love
welcome to season 2.
I love it.
And, all of you out there, kids, lovers, darlings, gentlemen, gentle ladies, gentle theys,
Mhm.
gentle thems, if you feel that you are being unfairly kept from pursuing your dreams by nepotism, by power, by money, fight the good fight, but be careful.
Be cautious.
Don't lose yourself in the attempt.
Don't dress up like jesters and cruise for cock at the catacombs.
Actually, you should dress up like a jester and cruise for cock at the catacombs. Do not listen to Michael. He is steering you wrong. Just take a buddy into... Use the buddy system when you are cruising in the catacombs.
Yes, smart.
Make sure there are at least 2 of you and one of you has a flashlight.
And the other one has poppers.
That I'm not gonna... I can't speak to that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail your podcast.
I bring you here explicitly to derail my podcast. It would be very boring indeed if I were not derailed. But yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Just a reminder, all of my loves out there, as I said, welcome back to season 2. If you would like the show to keep happening, just a reminder that we have merch. You can get tote bags, you can get hats, you can get pins, you can get magnets, you can get t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, all sorts of things on TeePublic through the Didn't Read It store. There is a link in the show notes. There's a link on our website. There's a link in our Instagram bio.
Links are abundant.
The links are abundant, and so is the merch. I am actively losing money making this show, and I don't mind. But if you want to help me out just a little,
Buy a shirt, Nana.
buy a shirt. And other than that, we're back. We should be back on our regular schedule every Sunday like clockwork. We have some fun stuff coming up. There's going to be a little Mary Shelley. There's going to be some more raunchy Elizabethan cross-dressing comedies.
Whoa!
There's going to be lots of spooky stuff for October.
Of course, starting early.
Yeah, we will be doing more Canterbury Tales. We are still Canterbury Tailing.
We are locked into the Canterbury Tales.
Uh-huh. The pilgrimage continues. We'll have some new guests. We'll have some old guests. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a good year.
Like, subscribe, share with a friend.
Yes, please.
Buy your friend a tank top and a magnet.
Buy your friend a tank top and then take them cruising in the catacombs. But before you go, like and subscribe to the show. Leave us a review.
Yes.
We could really use the help, but we're fucking pumped to be here.
Yeah, they are. We are. They are. We are. It's going to be a fantastic year.
Thanks so much for kicking it off with me, Michael.
Grace, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm honored to be season 2's first guest.
Thank you. Do you want to plug anything or anyone while you're here?
Oh, snap. I haven't thought about that. So, no, just all the gays and theys and beautiful people out there.
Ladies and gentlethems.
I don't think I can say that. Ladies and gentlethems. Whoa, that slid off the tongue faster than this Amontillado.
I officiated my friend's wedding, and that's how I started the service,
Oh.
which was great because the young people in the audience were just like, yes. And the older people, you could tell, were like, what?
They thought they were having
But it was
a stroke.
Well, it was like just close enough that you
Yeah.
could tell. I like watched a few, like as I was reading, I watched a few people just decide they'd heard me wrong.
Yeah.
Just be like, meh.
I like that a lot.
So, darlings, ladies and gentlethems, thank you again for being here with me. And as always, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author and helping them break through the nepotism nonsense holding them back. Because they could sure use the love.
Break through that wall.
Gotta do it. Bye.
Bye.
Didn't Read It was created, written, recorded, and edited by me, Grace Todd. You can follow the show on Instagram or Twitter at Didn't Read It.
Our theme song is Books, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton.
For sources cited and a full list of episodes, you can visit us at didntreaditpod.com.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review. It makes a big difference, and we appreciate it immensely.
If you did not enjoy the show, we are accepting applications for a full-time nemesis at didntreaditpod@gmail.com. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia, and to Pescatrio Publishing.